Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're opening a cold case file that's been sitting in the archives of paleontology for, almost 150 years now.
Just about.
We're talking about a creature that you know. I guarantee you know it. It's on gas station logos. It's the star of arguably the most heartbreaking kids movie ever made. And it's the centerpiece of every natural history museum.
And yet, if you really look at the history of this animal, it's basically a rap sheet of mistaken identity, academic, vandalism, and just a profound biological misunderstanding.
Exactly. We're talking about the Apatosaurus. And if you are sitting there screaming, "Don't you mean Brontosaurus?" at your device, hold that thought, because that name is just the tip of the iceberg.
Absolutely.
Today, we're going to find out why this animal spent 50 years wearing the wrong head. We're going to explore why it was called a swamp monster when it was really a land tank. And we're going to get into some high-level data that suggests everything we thought we knew about how a 20-ton animal breathes might be, completely wrong.
It's a messy story. It involves the infamous bone wars, some very fragile egos, and some really cutting-edge computer modeling that has just turned the family tree completely upside down.
So let's get into it. We are pulling from a massive stack of sources today, everything from the original 1877 field notes by Othniel Charles Marsh, all the way to a huge 2015 phylogenetic analysis.
Right, the one by Tushop and his colleagues, plus some fascinating biomechanics papers from as recent as 2020. We're covering the whole timeline of discovery.
Let's start with that name, Apatosaurus. It's Greek for deceptive lizard. Now, usually dinosaur names are their marketing gold. Tyrannosaurus is the tyrant lizard, Velociraptor.
Swift Caesar, yeah.
So why on earth did Marsh call this magnificent giant deceptive? Was it like hiding something?
It's funny, people often think that the name implies it was sneaky or camouflaged or that it was tricking the scientists, but the deception was purely anatomical. You have to remember, this is 1877. Marsh is looking at a partial skeleton. He's examining the chevron bones. These are the small bones on the underside of the tail that, protect the blood vessels.
Right, I'm with you.
And in Apatosaurus, these chevrons, they didn't look like the dinosaur bones Marsh was used to. They looked, deceptively like the chevrons of a mosasaur.
A mosasaur, you mean the marine reptiles, the sea monsters of the Cretaceous.
Exactly those. So Marsh saw these tailbones and thought, this is weird. It looks like a marine reptile's tail structure grafted onto a land animal, hence Apatosaurus. The deceptive lizard, it tricked him.
So that's 1877. Marsh publishes the name, but then only 2 years later, 1879, his team sends him another shipment of bones. And this is where the trouble really starts.
Oh, yeah. This new skeleton was spectacular. It was huge, it was relatively complete, and Marsh was absolutely floored by it. Now, you have to understand the context here.
This is the height of the bone wars.
It's the height of the bone wars. Marsh is in this bitter, frantic race against his rival, Edward Drinker Cope. They're just trying to name as many new species as they can to outdo each other.
Quantity over quality, basically.
Often, yes. So Marsh sees this massive skeleton, assumes it's a new species, and gives it arguably the best name in the history of science. Brontosaurus excelsus.
Noble thunder lizard. It's a great name.
It's so evocative, it sounds like a creature that shakes the earth when it walks. And because that skeleton was so complete, it became the first sauropod ever mounted in a major museum. The public didn't see Apatosaurus, they saw Brontosaurus. They fell in love with the thunder lizard.
But scientifically, the clock was ticking on that name from the start.
It was. In 1903, a paleontologist, Elmer Riggs, at the Field Museum in Chicago, he takes a hard clinical look at the two specimens. He compares the 1877 Apatosaurus and the 1879 Brontosaurus.
And he figures it out.
He realizes they're the same animal. The differences Marsh had seen were mostly due to ontogeny, which is just a fancy word for growth stages.
So the Apatosaurus was just a teenager?
Essentially, yes. The Apatosaurus specimen was a juvenile, and the Brontosaurus was an adult. They were the same genus.
And in the strict rules of taxonomy, there is only one law that matters. Priority.
First name wins. Apatosaurus was published in 1877, so it has priority. Brontosaurus 1879 becomes a junior synonym. It's technically invalid. In 1903, the thunder lizard ceased to exist.
And this is the part that always confuses me. I grew up in the 90s. I ate Bronto burgers. I watched The Land Before Time. If Riggs killed the name in 1903, why did it survive for another century?
You can thank Henry Fairfield Osborn for that. He was the head of the American Museum of Natural History, a titan in the field, and frankly, a bit of a chaotic figure with a massive ego.
And he just liked the name better.
He liked Brontosaurus better, he had a label to print for his museum, and he essentially just ignored Riggs' publication.
He just ignored a peer-reviewed correction.
He did. And when you run the most famous museum in the world, your label becomes the truth for millions of people. So you had this split reality where scientists quietly said Apatosaurus in their papers, and the entire rest of the world said Brontosaurus.
That's unbelievable. It's like branding just completely won out over fact.
For about 100 years, yeah.
But hold on, the outline mentions a plot twist in 2015. So just when we finally got everyone to stop saying Brontosaurus, I feel like I spent years correcting my friends, the science flipped again.
This is why paleontology is so exciting, right? It's never truly settled. In 2015, Emmanuel Chop and his team published this massive study. And I mean massive. They didn't just look at Apatosaurus, they looked at the whole family of Diplodocidae.
How many data points are we talking?
They analyzed 477 different morphological characters across 81 individual specimens.
Wow. So they're measuring every single bump on every bump.
Precisely. They fed all this data into a computer algorithm to sort out the family tree. And the algorithm, it spit out a surprise. It clustered the original Brontosaurus skeleton, that 1879 one apart from the Apatosaurus cluster.
Distinct enough to be its own genus again.
According to their data, yes. They identified key differences. For instance, in the neck structure, Apatosaurus has a much wider, more robust neck, and also in the shoulder blade. They concluded that, yeah, the differences were significant enough to separate them. So Brontosaurus was resurrected.
So the Brontosaurus is back. For real this time?
It's considered valid by many paleontologists now. Not all of them, mind you. Taxonomy is a consensus game. But for now, yes, you can say Brontosaurus without a scientist correcting you. It's recognized as a separate, slightly more slender cousin of the tank-like Apatosaurus.
That is a roller coaster. But the name isn't the only identity crisis this poor animal suffered. We have to talk about the head.
Ah, yes. The Frankenstein portion of the story.
Because for a long time, the Apatosaurus literally had the wrong head screwed onto its body.
And it all stems from a simple problem in taphonomy, the study of how organisms decay. Sauropod skulls are pretty small compared to their bodies, and the connection to the neck is fragile. So when the animal dies, the head often detaches and just rolls away.
So you find the massive body, but the head is gone.
Exactly. Marsh's skeletons were headless, but museums need to display complete animals, right? You can't put a headless giant in the main hall. So a guy named Adam Herman at the American Museum needed a head for his mount. And the only sauropod skull they really knew well at the time belonged to Camarasaurus.
Okay, paint a picture for us. What does a Camarasaurus head look like?
Think of a bulldog. It's boxy, high-arching nose, a blunt snout, and these big spoon-shaped teeth for chomping tough vegetation. It's a really heavy, robust skull.
And Apatosaurus is a heavy, robust animal, so they just assumed.
They made an assumption. Big body, big blocky head. They sculpted a Camarasaurus-like skull out of plaster and stuck it on the Apatosaurus neck. And that became the image of the dinosaur for decades. Every toy, every movie, it was this boxy, flat-faced creature.
But there were clues that this was wrong.
There were. In 1909, a paleontologist named Earl Douglas, working for the Carnegie Museum, he found this beautiful, nearly complete Apatosaurus skeleton. And right next to the neck, there was a skull. But it didn't look like a bulldog.
What did it look like?
It looked like a horse. Long, slender, with a square snout and these pencil-like teeth just at the front. It looked almost identical to the skull of Diplodocus, just a bit heavier.
So we have a Diplodocus-like head found right next to an Apatosaurus body. That seems pretty conclusive.
It should have been. The director of the Carnegie Museum, William Holland, he was convinced. He wanted to mount the Diplodocus-style head. But, and here comes the politics again, Henry Fairfield Osborn, that powerful rival.
The guy who kept Brontosaurus alive.
The same guy. He insisted the boxy head was correct. He essentially bullied Holland into doubt.
So what did Holland do?
He did something incredibly petty and principled. He mounted the skeleton in the museum hall, but he left it headless.
He just left the neck ending in a stump.
For years, he basically said, if I can't put the right head on it, I won't put any head on it.
That is a level of academic stubbornness I have to respect.
Unfortunately, after Holland died, the museum caved. They put the wrong boxy skull on it anyway.
Unbelievable. So when did we finally fix it?
Not until the 1970s. Two researchers, John McIntosh and David Berman, they went back and did this incredible forensic work. They traced the original field notes, the maps, everything, and they proved conclusively that the skull Douglas found was the real Apatosaurus skull.
So if you saw a drawing of a Brontosaurus before 1980, it was essentially a chimera, a mythological beast.
Body of one dinosaur, head of another, a complete lie.
Okay, so now that we've got the name back, sort of, and the head fixed, let's look at the actual animal. Biologically, what are we dealing with? Apatosaurus was built differently than its cousins, right?
It was a tank. I mean, if Diplodocus was a suspension bridge long and slender Apatosaurus was a fortress wall, it averaged about 21 to 23 meters long, but it was massive. We're talking 16 to 22 tons, with some individuals maybe pushing 30.
And the neck is where it gets really interesting structurally. The notes mention deeply bifurcated vertebrae. Can you break that down?
Bifurcated just means split. If you look at the neck vertebrae, the spines on top aren't a single blade. They're split into a V shape. This creates this wide, deep trough running all the way down the neck.
And what goes in the trough?
A massive ligament. The nuchal ligament. Think of it like a giant rubber band that runs from the shoulders to the head, helping hold the neck up passively. It saves a ton of energy. But the really mind-blowing thing about these bones is what was inside them. They were full of holes.
Holes.
Pneumaticity. They were honeycombed with air pockets, all connected to the respiratory system.
Which connects to the bird comparison.
Precisely. And this is a key takeaway. You cannot build an animal this big using mammalian biology. It just doesn't work.
Why not? Why couldn't a mammal get to 30 tons with a 30-foot neck?
It's the breathing. Mammals have tidal respiration. We breathe in, air goes into a dead end or lungs, then we breathe out. That means there's always dead space, stale air left in the trachea. If your neck is 10 meters long, you'd just be rebreathing your own CO2. You'd suffocate.
So how did Apatosaurus do it?
Almost certainly with a flow-through system like modern birds. Air flows in one direction through the lungs and into these air sacs that permeate the skeleton. It allows for continuous oxygen extraction. It's highly efficient, it helps dump heat, and it makes the skeleton incredibly light for its size.
So this massive lumbering giant actually had a respiratory system more like a falcon than an elephant.
Exactly, an air-cooled, high-performance biological machine.
Which brings us to growth. I was stunned by the numbers here. These things started from eggs, so they started tiny, right?
Tiny. The size of a small dog, maybe.
And they grew to 20 tons in how long?
About 10 to 15 years to reach near adult size.
That seems impossible.
It does if you think of them as cold-blooded reptiles. But the bone histology, where we cut the bone and count the growth rings like a tree, it shows they were growing at an explosive rate. In their peak teenage years, they were putting on up to 5,000 kilograms a year.
That's over 13 kilos a day.
Imagine gaining the weight of a toddler every single day for a year.
You would just be an eating machine. That's all you do.
That was their life. Fermentation vats on legs, processing massive amounts of low-quality vegetation just to fuel that metabolic furnace.
Let's move to the other end of the animal, the tail. It's incredibly long, tapered like a whip. And I remember hearing about the supersonic theory in the 90s.
Yes, this was a huge deal. In 1997, a computer model suggested the tip of the tail was thin and light enough that the animal could flick it fast enough to break the sound barrier.
Creating a sonic boom.
Over 200 decibels, like a cannon shot. The theory was they use it for defense or signaling.
But I saw a 2020 study in our stack that challenges this.
And this is a great example of physics versus biology. The model said the physics could work, but the 2020 study looked at the biology of it. They argued that if you actually snapped a tail made of flesh, bone, and skin at supersonic speeds, the stress would just shatter the vertebrae.
Because they could do it once.
Exactly. And then they'd have a broken necrotic tail. It's a biological structure, not a leather bullwhip.
So if they weren't cracking them like whips, what were they doing with them? That study proposes something else, something gentler.
A tactile organ. This is fascinating. The suggestion is they use their tails for touch.
Like an antenna.
Think about it. You're a 70-foot-long animal. Your head is way up front. How do you know where the rest of your herd is, especially if you're migrating in the dust or at dusk?
You can't see behind you.
Right. But if you have this long, sensitive tail that you can gently sweep back and forth, you can maintain physical contact with the animal behind you.
Like holding hands in a line.
Or like elephants using their trunks to touch each other. It turns the tail from a weapon of war into a tool for social cohesion. It implies they were tight-knit groups communicating through touch.
I love that image. It completely reframes the animal from a solitary swamp monster to a social creature that needs to stay in touch with its family.
It makes them real.
And speaking of swamp-bound, we used to think they lived in swamps because they were just too heavy for land.
That's the old sluggish reptile bias. But we know from the geology of the Morrison Formation that it wasn't a swamp. It was semi-arid. Think of a Serengeti, but with ferns instead of grass. Wet seasons and dry seasons.
And it was a crowded ecosystem.
Very. They lived alongside Stegosaurus, Camarasaurus, and the apex predator Allosaurus.
And Allosaurus was actively hunting them.
We have evidence for it. There's an Apatosaurus hip bone with bite marks that perfectly match the teeth of an Allosaurus. So yes, they were on the menu. But they weren't defenseless.
Beyond just size.
They had one specific tool, a single, massive claw on their thumb. The other toes were blunt, but that thumb had this wicked, recurved claw. Could have been for grasping trees, but it'd also be a nasty surprise for a predator.
There's one last debate. The posture. I always picture their heads held high, reaching for the treetops like a giraffe. But the sources are conflicted.
This is the ostrich versus vacuum cleaner debate.
Go on.
One camp looks at living animals and says, look, almost all of them hold their necks up in an alert posture. They argue the joints allowed for a high vertical reach, the classic swan neck look.
But the other side?
The other side, using computer models, argued that the neck was actually quite stiff vertically. They claimed Apatosaurus couldn't lift its head much higher than its shoulders.
So it was just a low browser.
Exactly. They suggest it stood in one spot and swept its neck side to side in a huge U-shape, mowing down ferns on the ground without moving its heavy body. A biological lawnmower.
So what's the consensus now?
It's leaning back toward a mix. The models probably missed the effect of cartilage, which would have made the neck more flexible, so they likely could lift their heads high when needed, but probably spent a lot of time feeding at mid to low levels.
It really feels like every time we apply a new technology, the animal changes.
That's the beauty of it. Apatosaurus is the perfect example. It started as a deceptive lizard. Because we didn't understand it, it lost its name, it lost its head, it was put in a swamp.
And now?
Now we see it as this terrestrial masterpiece, a distinct genus from Brontosaurus, with a bird-like respiratory system, growing at speeds that defy logic, living in complex social herds. It's a redemption arc, 150 years in the making.
It really is. So I want to leave the listener with a little assignment. Next time you're in a museum, looking up at that giant sauropod mount, do some detective work.
Check the label, of course, but check the skull.
Look at the face. Is it the boxy bulldog face, or is it the slender, horse-like face? Because even today, some museums haven't updated their mounts.
And if you see that boxy head, you'll know you're looking at a piece of history. Just not natural history. You're looking at a mistake preserved in plaster.
And maybe, just maybe, picture that tail not cracking like a gunshot, but gently brushing the flank of another dinosaur in the dark. Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you on the next one.